This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, we turn now to Yemen, where a U.S.-backed offensive against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula rages on. Yesterday, 4 civilians were killed and 3 were injured when their vehicle was shelled in the country's southern Shabwa province. In April, Yemen's president embarked on an all-out war against Al-Qaeda and began a series of heavy airstrikes. Since then, an estimated 21,000 people have been displaced amidst the fighting.
Meanwhile, the government has cracked down on the media. Earlier this month, journalist Adam Barron was deported from Yemen after reporting from there for 3 years from McClatchy in the Christian Science Monitor. He was deported a day after the United States closed its embassy in Sana'a over security fears. Then Yemeni authorities called staff at Al Jazeera Arabic and ordered a reporter and cameraman who were covering the fighting in the Shabwa province to leave the area. Soon after, journalist Iona left the country. After hearing from her sources, the government intended to deport her too. She was the last accredited foreign reporter in Yemen. Iona joins us here in New York. She's been based in Sana'a for the last 3.5 years. She's the Yemen correspondent for the Times of London. Welcome back to Democracy Now! Nice to have you in studio for the first time, Iona. What is happening right now in Yemen?
I think now it's very tense times. We've got this conflict that's been going on now for almost a month. It's very difficult to know exactly what's going on the ground, but it is certainly the most significant assault against a military offensive against Al-Qaeda, I think, ever in Yemen. And that is causing a kind of backlash with obviously issues then in Sana'a of Al-Qaeda then carrying out assassinations, IED attacks as a kind of retaliatory against this military offensive. So on a security perspective, things are very tense, and the security situation is pretty dire. And on a day-to-day basis for Yemenis, the economy is declining. There's a major fuel shortage at the moment, which means that people are having issues in even just pumping water. So the price of water has doubled in the last month. And so just on a day-to-day basis for Yemenis, aside from the security issues, it's a real struggle at the moment. So, yeah, it's pretty tough in Yemen for people right now.
And what was the impact of the Arab Spring protests in Yemen on government policy or on any kinds of social reforms?
Well, at the moment, we're in this period of transition. So after 2011, Ali Abdullah Saleh, the former president who'd been in power for 33 years, he stepped down. There was then this slightly farcical situation of a one-man election, and the vice president was voted in. This transition process was, in theory, only supposed to sort of take about 2 years initially to then have elections. That has obviously gone on, and there was a period of national dialogue that was then extended. And at the moment, Yemen is now trying to build a new or create a new constitution. So within that, there will be a new system in Yemen of federalism. What that's going to look like, we don't know yet. And obviously, hopefully as well, those issues that were brought up in the national dialogue relating to social structures and things like that will also be included in that constitution. But it's a long, long process.
Talk about the drone strikes in Yemen. Who has been involved with them? The Yemeni government, military, U.S. military?
Yeah, I mean, the issue with the drone strikes, of course, in Pakistan, we've seen a real drop-off. In Yemen, that hasn't been the case. And I think more troubling in Yemen has been the issue with civilian casualties, which has been a problem. And that really brings into question the whole issue of intelligence between the Yemeni government, the Americans, Saudi, obviously, involvement with that. But you know, the most infamous case recently being the 12 civilians that were killed in a drone strike back in December, is where that intelligence is coming from, how it is possibly being manipulated, and how reliable it is when you've got civilian casualties being, you know, as a result of these drone strikes. But they're still being used, and, you know, this military offence that's going on at the moment was launched by 3 days of aerial bombardment by the Yemeni Air Force, US drones, possibly even US naval bombardments from the sea, which have been used before. And so, yes, they're still being used as part, actually, of this conflict that's going on in the moment, as well as sort of more targeted killing out in rural areas beyond where this conflict is happening at the moment.
Well, you mentioned that drone strike in December. Earlier this year, Human Rights Watch said that the drone strike failed to comply with rules imposed by President Obama last year to protect civilians. Human Rights Watch concluded that the attack killed 12 men ages 20 to 65 and wounded 15 15 others. They were taking part in a wedding procession. This is a clip of a video that accompanied the Human Rights Watch report.
The U.S. government made a big mistake. They killed innocent people. This was a serious crime. They turned many kids into orphans, many wives into widows. Many were killed and many others were injured, although everyone was innocent.
What's the impact of this drone strike and others in terms of the Yemeni population?
I actually went down there 6 days after that strike happened. I spoke to a lot of the families who'd lost family members. I spoke to some of the survivors as well. And I think the big problem, particularly in instances like that, where you have a large number of civilian casualties, is the total wall of silence that it's met with by Washington. There is no admittance that an error has been made. It's left to the Yemeni government to then pick up the pieces, to try and mediate with the local tribes. I mean, there was fighting every night down there in that area where that drone strike happened between whether it was Ansar al-Sharia or local tribes, even the local people didn't know, and the military as a direct result of that drone strike because people were angry about it. And when there's this kind of wall of silence from Washington, you've got this slightly ridiculous situation in Yemen at the moment where the government has been willing now to admit when they've killed civilians. For example, in the last couple of weeks, there were tribesmen who were killed in Sana'a that the government claimed were Al-Qaeda originally. They then came out with a statement just a few days ago and admitted that they were civilians, that they were not Al-Qaeda. In return, Al-Qaeda themselves, when they carried out an operation in December and they killed civilians, they put out a video release saying, we're sorry, we killed civilians, this shouldn't have happened, we're going to offer compensation. So you've got the Yemeni government willing to admit when they've done wrong, Al-Qaeda on the other side, but in the middle, when Washington does this or the Americans are responsible, there's nothing. There's a wall of silence. And this is a propaganda war really now in Yemen. So when you've got the government willing to admit that they've done something wrong, and Al-Qaeda, but not the US in between, they're losing that propaganda war. They're really losing a lot on that by not speaking out when these errors happen.